In this video, I'll be going over assignment 13, which is exercise 6.13 in the textbook, Factorials. Factorials are used frequently in probability problems. The factorial of a positive integer n, written like this and pronounced n factorial, is equal to the product of the positive integers from 1 to 9. So product, again, meaning multiplication. Write an app that evaluates the factorials of the integers from 1 to 5. Display the results in tabular format. What difficulty might prevent you from calculating the factorial of 20? Okay, so let's look at section 6.4, and where they have examples using the for statement. And they have examples like this one. It says from 1 to 100 in increments of 1. And this is 100 to 1 in decrements of 1. 7 to 77 in increments of 7. 20 to 2. And okay, so these are really great examples of how we would do what they're asking in this exercise, which is asking us to evaluate the factorials of integers from 1 to 5. So we're going to do just like in the examples. We're going to do 1 to 5. So 1 to 5 with incrementing by 1 each time. And then we are going to multiply or get the product from 1 to 5. So we're going to increment 1 through 5, and this is in a tabular format. So one side we're going to have the numbers 1 through 5. We're going to increment by 1 each time, 1 to 5. And on the other side of this, kind of like a table, will be the product of the numbers 1 through 5. So 1 times 1, 1 times 1 is 1, so then that would be 1 times 2. 2 times 3 is 6, and so then it would be 6 times 4, which is 24, and then it would be 24 times 5, which is, so it would go on 1 to 5, multiplying in that manner. And we're going to make it try to look kind of like a table, so you can see 1 multiplied by itself is 1, 2 multiplied by 1 is 2, 3 multiplied by 2 is 6, 4 multiplied by 6 is 24, and so on. Okay, so we're going to start, as always, with our using directive of system and give it a class. And since this exercise is factorials, I'm going to go ahead and name it factorials, but you can name it whatever you want to name it. It should be something that, you can name it program so that you know this is the class for the whole program that you're trying to run here. But I'm just going to name it based on the assignment that we're doing. Okay, and then within the class, we're going to have, again, a static method of main. We're going to have a main method, and that main method is not going to have any parameters or arguments. Okay, so because we know that we are going to be multiplying the numbers from 1 to 5, we're going to be finding the factorial. We're going to be calculating the factorials from numbers 1 to 5. So in order to do this, we're going to do this outside of the main method. We're going to create a new method. Create a method, and this method is going to calculate the factorials. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that part first so we know how to calculate the numbers. So first, it's going to be static because it belongs to this class of factorials itself. It doesn't belong to any other class or anything. So it's static. And we're going to give it the data type of long, because what long is it's capable of storing large whole numbers. So usually we use int, but because we're going to be using large whole numbers, we're going to use long, so that it can, because we're going to want it to display as long as the numbers that we want to input. Okay, so static long, and then we're going to call it calculate factorial. And again, you can name this whatever you want, that you know what it's doing. That it's easy to remember what this method is for. And again, it's a method. Oops. It is a method, so we're going to have an open and close curly brace. And within the method, we are going to have, actually, this is a method, and we are going to use a parameter that we're going to give it a variable with type of integer. So we're going to do int, and then we're just going to give it the variable name of n. So we know when we use n, we're going to be storing this value using this value here that's within the method. It's declared within the method. Okay. So I guess, okay, so a better way to word this is that it's representing the number that we're going to be calculating within the factorial. So this is representing the number that we don't know right now, because this number will be changing. Well, the number won't be changing, but the number will be based on what we're going to tell it up here in the main method. All right, so in order to do this, we're going to create a for loop. And in that for loop, we're going to initiate a variable. And we're going to call it or declare it we're going to give it the name of I. So just like we saw in these examples, we're going to be using the variable of I, and we are going to do the same thing. We're going to use the type of integer type, so it's a whole number. So we're going to initiate a variable that we're going to call I, and then we're going to give it the starting value of 2. So we're going to initiate a variable I with starting value of 2. Okay, so what we want is we're going to initiate a variable with I from 2, or the starting variable of 2, from 2 to the value of n. Okay? And then we are going to have to say that I has to be less than or equal to the value of n. So like here in the examples, in order from it to be from 1 to 100, so we're going to say from 2 to n, because we don't have that number. We're just using n to represent that value. So we're going to say int I equals 2, and we're going to say I should be less than or equal to n. And then we're also going to increment it by 1. Okay. So I has to be less than or equal to n. To the value of n. And I increment by 1. So we use I plus plus. Here they're using plus plus I, but I don't think it matters which way you do it. I use I plus plus because I'm saying I'm taking I and adding 1 to it each time. Okay, so how we write that is for, because it's a for loop. And inside the parentheses is where we're going to initiate the variable I with the type int. So int I, and then we're going to assign it the value, the starting value of 2. And then we're going to write a semicolon, because we're saying we also, so we need this to be true, and also what we want to be true is I has to be less than or equal to n. So I has to be less than or equal to n. And again, we're going to use the semicolon because we still need to do one more thing, and that is we needed to increment by 1. So we're going to do that by entering I plus plus, so that it increments by 1 each time. So we're going to say, for this statement being true, okay, we're going to do this with what's in these parentheses. Jeez. Okay, so what we want it to do is we want it to take the result of this. So whatever this n is, it's going to say I initially starts with 2. We're using the variable of I that will initially start with 2. And then we're going to take I and we're going to increase, we're going to increment or increase by 1 each time. And we're going to make sure that I is less than or equal to the value of n. So we're saying if this statement is true, what we're going to do is each time we're going to take the result of this and why is it doing that? It's annoying. Okay, well, we're going to take the result of it and we're going to multiply it by the result, and we're going to multiply the results by I. So we're incrementing it each time, so the value of I is going to change. It's going to start with 2, but it will increment each time. So first, outside of the for loop, before the for loop, outside of the for loop, we're going to create a variable to store the value of the result. And because we don't want the variable to be 0 or anything like that, we're going to initialize it with a value of 1, or give it a starting value of 1. And we are going to use the long data type because we don't know how long the result might be. Well, we do because we know that we're going to have it with numbers 1 through 5, but for the purpose of this method does not know that it's going to be 1 through 5, if that makes sense. Okay, so create a variable. We're going to give it the data type of long, and we're going to name it results, because that's what we're trying to do, is get the result, and we're going to give it the starting value of 1. And then within our for loop, we're going to say what we want is that result. We're going to take that result, and we're going to assign it the value of result times I. But the better way to say this is results multiplied by itself by I equals the value of result will be results multiplied by I. Okay? And then what we're going to do is outside of the for loop, because we're saying continue to do this, continue to loop through this and do this until it reaches the value of n. So once it reaches that value of n, it will stop looping, and then what we want it to do is we want it to return the result. So we want it to return the calculated factorial as the results of the method, right? So now we know how to calculate the factorial. We have to go back up here to the main method, and within the main method, we're going to want to create another for loop. And this time we're going to be doing it similar to this, but we're going to be doing it for the numbers 1 through 5, and we're just going to increment it by 1, and then that's it. We're not doing any multiplying or anything. We're just going to display them. So create a for loop to increase, create a for loop for numbers 1 through 5 to increment, to start at 1 and increment by 1 until it reaches 5. Okay, so we're going to create a for loop for numbers 1 to 5 to start at with the value of 1 and increment by 1 until it reaches 5. And we're going to do this just like we've already done, and we see here. We're going to create a for loop. Inside the parentheses, we're going to give it the initial value of 1. We're going to say I has to be less than or equal to 5, and we're going to increment by 1. So we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to use int, a type of int for a whole number. Oh, sorry, we're going to create for and parentheses. And within the for loop, we're going to say, within the for parameters, I guess these are the parameters for it, I don't know. We're going to say integer I, and we're going to give it the value of 1. And we're going to say I has to be less than or equal to 5. And again, these are separated by semicolons. And then we're going to increment that by 1. And we're going to give it a closing parenthesis, and then we're going to say so as long as this is true, continue to do this. As long as this is true, do this until that's not true anymore. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to create a method, create a variable. And this variable is we're going to assign the results of the calculate factorial method. And then we're going to give it the parameter of I. Use I as parameter. So this is a variable. We are going to not give it the type of int, we're going to give it the type of long. You can give it the type of int, I think, but we're using long just because if it wasn't 1 through 5, we don't know how large this could be, so we're going to use long. Okay, so long, and let's give it the name, we'll just say the factorial, because this is the results of the calculated factorial. So this will be the factorial that you're going to display on the console. So we're going to assign it the value of calculate factorial with the parameter of I. So right here is where we declare the variable of I. We're using the variable of I to calculate the factorial. We're calculating the factorial of, so the numbers 1 through 5. One of these numbers, 1 through 5, each time. Okay, so we are also going to, within the for loop, so we're saying that for each time this number goes up and it calculates the factorial, for each time we're also going to display to the console a string that has the number that we're getting and the factorial. So I here is representing the numbers 1 through 5, and the factorial is calculating the factorials of those numbers. So for each time it increments by 1, we're also going to display it to the console. So we're going to do a console.writeLine, and we are going to display to the console a string. But this string is going to be an interpolated string, which means we need the little $sign there. And we're going to say, we're going to give it a space first, just so that it has a little bit away from the edge of the console, so it's not, the number that we're going to print is not going to be right at the edge, it'll just have a little space there. And we're going to add the value of the number here, so it'll be numbers 1 through 5 here, and we're going to do that by entering the variable of I that we created here. So I, or the numbers 1 through 5, will be here, incremented by 1 each time. So it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. At each time it iterates, it'll be 1, and then we're going to give it a tab, so that it looks more like it's a table with the numbers 1 through 5 on one side, and the other side will have our factorial. So it will have, 1 times 1 is 1. So it'll have 1 over here and a 1 over here. And then it will have 2 over here and a 2 over here. And then it'll have 3 over here and a 6 over here, and so on. Okay, so let me display the results to the console for each iteration. Okay, so that's what we're doing here. For each iteration, that's why it's still part of the for loop, we're going to display the results to the console. I just added a space here so it's not right on the edge of the console, and I added a tab in between. Alright, now outside of the for loop, we are also going to display to the console from the exercise Oh, here it is. It says, let's see. Write an app that evaluates the factorials of the integers 1 to 5 and display the results in a tabular format, or kind of like a table. And then it asks, what difficulty might prevent you from calculating the factorial of 20? So what we're going to do here is we are going to display our Q&A to the console. Alright, but before we do that, let's go ahead and check if it's working, if our app is working and it's displaying it correctly. Alright, so we have our numbers 1 through 5 here, and the results of calculating the factorials over here. So first with 1, it's just going to be 1. And then we're multiplying 1 times 2 is 2, 2 times 3 is 6, 6 times 4 is 24, 24 times 5 is 120. So that all looks right, it's calculating it right. Now, what we want to do is, just to make it a little bit easier to understand what's going on, is outside of the for loop, we're going to display like a title, I guess, and we can display like labels for the headers for number and factorial. Okay, so display, we already know. To display to the console, we'll just say console.writeLine. We could do console.write too, it doesn't matter. Okay, and we're just going to say factorials of integers 1 through 5. And obviously you can say whatever you want there. For your title, you can just say factorials. You can say whatever you want. Alright, and now for the headers, we are going to do the same thing with console.writeLine. And we're going to display something like number. And then we're going to add a tab because we have a tab here. And actually we'll give a space because I did add a space here. And I don't need the number to be off the edge, although I could. I think it looks a little bit more like this is centered by having the space here after the word number. Okay, we're going to tab, and then we're going to say factorial. So then our table will kind of look kind of more like a table with number and factorial kind of labeled above it. Let's see how that looks. So we have factorials of integers 1 through 5, and then we have number and factorial. Factorials of integers 1 through 5, and that kind of looks goofy. And then let's give this its own a new line because it kind of looked jumbled up. So let's see how it looks now. Alright, so this looks better. It does have a little title up here, and if you see now how it's kind of like this is not right on the edge like this word number is. Now if we do the opposite and we take this space out of here and we put the space here, you might like that better. It's all like your preference how you want to do it. Alright, and it kind of looks still, like numbers here and factorials here. If you were to do it that way, I would give a little bit more space in between. Maybe even give it 2 tabs. And then you'd have to give it 2 tabs here. Alright, so that looks a little bit better. We can see it more like kind of like a table. You could try to do lines if you want, however you want to do it, however you want to make it look better, do that. Make it your own, make it look different, make it look better. So another thing we should do is within our main method, we will do a console.readLine, so that way the app it won't close before enter is pressed. We should know this by now. So then you don't get all those extra lines. Alright, so now display our Q&A to the console. So console.WriteLine. And the question is, what difficulty might prevent you from calculating factorial of 20? So this is the question. I'm just going to go ahead and copy it and paste it right here. So that's the question. And then we'll say another console.WriteLine. And this is your answer. So it asks, what difficulty might prevent you from calculating the factorial of 20? So definitely the factorial of 20 is an extremely large number. The factorials of large numbers rapidly grow beyond commonly used data types, representable limits. So I would give an answer something like that the number could be too large to calculate all the way to 20. And here's why. I would give so your answer here. Okay. I would definitely say something like about how large of a number it is what might prevent you from calculating it. Alright, so now it should look something like this. Let's give this a little bit of space though. So let's go ahead and start this on a new line. And I didn't close that. And let's see it again. Alright, so this is like the basic, this is how you do this assignment. This is very basic, doing the numbers 1 through 5, and here's the factorials. I would definitely make it your own, add styling or whatever to the console. Mine, let's see, assignment, is this assignment 13? Mine, although I just took you through how to do the assignment, mine looks much different. So mine starts with the number and factorial, and it's set up much different than what we've seen. I have my question and answer here, and then I gave an example. As you can see, up to 20 it becomes very large. So I did a whole other section, whole other method that calculated through 20, and then I also did another method that calculated through 25 to show how once it gets up to 20, by using the long data type, it doesn't create any errors, it still looks right, but once you get past 20, even the long data type, it doesn't display correctly. So obviously I made mine my own. I did other things to it. I suggest you guys all do the same thing by making it your own and making sure that what you see in the console, at the very least, you have it so that it looks like a table right here with numbers on one side and factorials on the other. And then I would have your question and answer here. Alright, so I hope that helped you guys. I hope that you understand a little bit how to use the iterations, and again, how to go from one number up until another number and iterate by however much you're trying to do. That's the purpose of this exercise. Alright, so again, I hope this helps. I'll see you in the next assignment.